Yeah, ever feel like your errors pile up while your accomplishments disappear? Well, you've been playing too much Tetris. I didn't know people still played Tetris, but today marks 30 years since Nintendo first showed us how exciting the idle act of neatly piling up strangely shaped blocks can in fact be. So why are we so obsessed with such a simple game, and what has Tetris done in terms of the world of mobile gaming? Joining us is Stephen Upstone, the co-founder of LoopMe. Good to see you. You're also the Mobile Marketing Association chairman, aren't you, as well?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Good to see you again. 30 years since Tetris. How key has Tetris been in launching the idea of mobile gaming?
Well, Tetris was named the greatest game of all time by a number of sort of experts and magazines. And it really took off on mobile when you're originally using Game Boys, yeah. So you know, in very limited graphical forms. But if you look at it, they've sold about 170 million copies. I think they announced in 2010, of which 100 million came actually to phones. So all of those sort of early days of using consoles and Game Boys never getting the same kind of reach that they got on smartphones.
Is Tetris the mobile version of the paddle tennis that we had for video games?
No, it's
Space Invaders.
It's a block shorting game. It actually means.
No, I know what it is. No, yeah. I just meant in terms of its impact, right? You know, we think of the first.
I think
the first major video game is either paddle tennis or Space Invaders.
I think it's huge for a big category called casual gaming, which actually brought a lot of women into the industry as well, where it's a kind of puzzle-solving game. And now there are obviously a lot of others in a similar genre, like Candy Crush, for instance, which has been a massive business. And I think that the big defining moment is when all these games moved to smartphones, the business model then changed. So my company, LoopMe, we help people distribute games on smartphones, and now they're provided free. So Tetris, a huge game, greatest game of all time, arguably, had 170 million copies sold. We work now with Talking Tom and Angry Birds, where they've had 2 or 3 billion copies downloaded. So it's a much, much bigger scale, you know, because there's one of these in every pocket. That's the big shift, really.
It's very easy to have. Well, it's not easy, but you mentioned Angry Birds. There are extraordinary hits, you know, again, and people don't know what's going to be a hit or not. I mean, it's like making films, I guess. When you have a big hit, how do people monetize that? Then actually, how difficult is it for them to come up with another one?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a couple of things that have changed in the market that make some of these businesses less hits driven, if you like, and that is now they are also a platform. So in the past, if you were a games publisher, you couldn't then use that game to remarket to someone else, whereas now you can download a game from a game. And also the other big asset that these big games companies like King have is all the data they have. So it becomes a market where there are billions of consumers who can now access these games on their phones, and learning which people like playing which games and how much they like to spend on those games. Because the business model now is typically you're given the game for free, you're allowed to play it, and the more you play it or the more you enjoy it, then the more you're likely to spend on it.
So you mentioned investors clearly have some skepticism about being to repeat the trick, you know, and it's about, as you say, a sustainable business model.
Yeah, so I think I couldn't comment exactly on the share prices, but I do think that you're investing, I suppose, in a couple of interesting trends. One, now this massive scale of distribution, which also accesses different consumers. You know, as I say, women are now playing more games than men are, and that just is unthinkable a couple of decade ago or so. And you're also taking a bet on their ability to use this data to remarket themselves. And once they've built a very big business with a lot of capital, they can also acquire these hot new young game studios that come through. So you move from being a publisher to being a platform, and that I think is a key shift which investors should think about from a value point of view. And then companies like myself will sit there with large amounts of data, now putting video ads in front of very soon to be, you know, as many as 1 billion consumers around the world. So it becomes a very, very big scaled business. You know, the Russian markets, Chinese markets, absolutely huge.
And do games translate easily from a...
They do need a little bit of work.
The interest is Chinese game company Riku, which is set up in London over the last year, and they made a big play that they were going here. Can you translate?
So some games need more translation. That was, I mean, in a very literal sense. If you have a game like Ruzzle, which is a word game, then you'll need to change the structure of it. But also there are some subtle things as well, just the way in which consumers interact with different types of graphics. There are certain kind of, music works better in different areas. So there's a whole localization business that take these games into multiple territories. But actually the translation hurdle is not huge. So you have very small companies, 30, 50 people, who create games that are really distributed on a very, very global basis, very, very quickly. And that's, I think, the speed of marketing now is much, much faster than it ever has been before. And the other important factor is these are social games.
Yeah.
So if I'm playing it, I want to tell everyone else what score I've got. I want to play directly against a friend. My wife will sit and play against her friend sat in Berlin, who she was at school with, a Scrabble game or something like this. And that social piece is also a very important distribution method as well for the games companies. So they have this data, they have a social distribution channel as well, and a massive scalable audience. So it is still ultimately kind of hits driven, but I do think it starts to evolve into being a platform business, and that's an interesting change.
What do you think of that, Anne?
Well, the one thing I always wonder is some of these games, a lot of the people are kids playing it, and this model of the free, and then you have to unlock the different stage and the different part. How much? I mean, sooner or later, somebody's going to probably tighten that up, because normally it's not their phone, it's mum or dad's phone. And there's huge bills potentially being kind of paid unknowingly by the adult, by the kid unlocking these different stages.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important. There's a big change now that your child is often playing on your phone, but you wouldn't ever give your child a pile of money and go let them loose in a sweet shop. And essentially, if you're letting them know what your passcode is, then that's what you're doing, or letting them loose in Hamleys or something like that. So I don't think that need be necessarily a concern. Actually, publishing as a business model, and to some extent fashion and many other markets, always had a problem where people might buy something they might not use. How many women have a dress in their wardrobe that was never used, or a book on the shelf that someone bought that's never been used. So that problem actually is overcome now by paying for usage. So to have something for free is actually, I think, a great step forward for the consumer. But yes, you need to be very careful you don't leave your kids with large amounts of money or access to money.
Yes, it's a very, very, very fair point to make. Stephen, good to see you. Thanks very much, Dee, for joining us. And nice to see you as well. Have a good week.